So everybody, you're very welcome to the last webinar to launch Genspect. And later on, we're going to be showing you a presentation about who we are and what we're about. Just a little bit about myself before we go on to Lisa Marchiano. I'm a psychotherapist and I'm based in Ireland. And I've been embroiled in this really since 2017 when I wrote an article about gender, because I often write about mental health issues. And as a result, I did the film Trans Kids, It's Time to Talk. And I've always tried to be a generalist and kind of talk about this and talk about that. But there was something incredibly compelling about gender in the last few years that kept on bringing me back to it, no matter how much I tried to pull away into a more broader place. And that was the fact that people were being silenced and that there was terrible, terrible tragedies ongoing. And clinicians seemed to be not listening to really valid concerns, whether it was detransitioners who weren't really taken up on and their voices weren't being heard, and parents. And then when I was at a loose end, when COVID struck, because I often give talks, you will notice I'm very talkative. I often give talks, and COVID struck and I was kind of at a loose end. I had definitely way more time than I usually had. And somebody asked me to run a few therapeutic support meetings for parents, and I was delighted to, because they were on my mind as like, God, they're a group that aren't really being attended to. And as soon as those therapeutic meetings went on ahead, whoa, it was just, I just thought, oh, there's a whole other side tragedy happening here. There's a tragedy happening with young people who are being transitioned, perhaps inappropriately, and then later on coming to regret it and being lost and being vulnerable and being kind of overlooked. And now there's a whole other side show, which is the parents whose concerns are not being listened to, who are being dismissed, who are being called transphobic, who are being shunned by their good friends and their community, and who are being misunderstood on every level. And the parents' meetings really, really moved me. And I realized we've got to get this out. There's so many people. There were different people coming, and the meeting, which started once a week, quickly went into 2, 3, 4 meetings a week, more than I could handle. And I realized something much bigger needed to happen, and we needed to harness all these voices. And the grand plan with Genspect is to harness all the parent groups from all over the world, not to run support groups, that's all being done, and it's being done very well by some brilliant, obviously parents of RGD Kids, Bayswater, Our Duty, so many brilliant organizations are doing them. However, it's to harness the voices and get those voices out into the media. Because if you think of the trans phenomenon on a lot of levels, you could go back and you could study queer theory, and you could study affirmative and lots of things. However, I would argue the hearts and minds of the public were swayed by sad stories of children who said they were born in the wrong body. And, if you look back, Jazz Jennings' first kind of foray into the media was 2006. It was very early, a trans kid, and that's how she was described. And she was, it was purported to be a very sad story of somebody being born in the wrong body. We're 15 years later, and we know being born in the wrong body is not a thing. You can't be born in the wrong body. What you can do is you can have gender issues, you can have gender dysphoria, and there's many different ways to treat it. But you can't be born in the wrong head, you can't be born in the wrong body. It doesn't bear thinking, if you follow me. If you think about it for a few seconds, you realize you're born with the body you have, and with it, you do what you wish. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do the equivalent by bringing the parents' stories to the media, because the parents' voices haven't been heard in the media, and the parents' voices haven't had much of a chance to be heard. And this is our big kind of game changer, that we want to bring parent stories out there and keep on bringing parent stories out there, because there's some really, really, really beautiful, loving, engaged, decent parents who have genuine and good and thoughtful concerns about the treatment their children are getting, and they're being waved away. And it's so profoundly unjust and upsetting and wrong that we have to work together. There's thousands of us, there's thousands of parents. And so there's a huge strength in that. And this is our job, to kind of work together and to make sure that all the parent groups come together and say, yeah, if there's thousands of parents who are all saying the same thing, which we're unhappy with the treatment our gender distressed kids are getting, then the parents have a point. And that's where we're going. We're lifting off from that point. So with that long intro, can we welcome Lisa Marchiano, who was really there from the beginning. Before we go into the talking about parenting in the midst of an epidemic, of a psychic epidemic. Could you tell us, Lisa, what turned your head or how you first got into it?
Yeah, well, this first came to my attention in a big way around 20. Well, it actually came into my practice. It may have been as early as 2014. I had a parent with a kid who was sort of doing the experimentation and going through the different, first this kid was an ally, and then this kid was non-binary, and it was all kind of new to me, and I just thought, oh, experimenting with gender, how interesting. And then this mom shared that some of the girls were getting mastectomies at 18, and that was, if you sort of say, well, when did the penny drop? That was the penny dropping for me, because my my background as a Jungian analyst, I really appreciate that we all have kind of gendered aspects, if you want to think about it that way, things that we might typically associate with being masculine or feminine. All people have all of those. So, and which is wonderful and rich and a good thing to explore. But when you start changing your body, then you're concretizing something. So it was up very early for me, but I don't think I recognized the extent of the problem until 2016, when I started seeing it. I had my daughter was a young teen at that point, and it was really in her friend group, and I saw it very clearly, and I thought, this is social contagion. And when I started looking into it, it was just amazing how that narrative was really disallowed. The only place I found reference to it was Fourth Wave Now. So it's kind of, Stella, as you and I have talked about, it's one of those things, once you see it, you can't look away. And I just started paying more and more attention, and was really horrified. I mean, it's this confluence of things, right? It's the fact that this is socially contagious, which I don't have any doubts about, and then how it's responded to by the medical and mental health community. Because of affirmation, a kid can develop this real distress around gender, be led to believe that transition's the right thing, and the therapists and the doctors are going to say yes. And then the final piece of that, which you really lifted up, is the very reasonable, entirely reasonable, commonsensical, loving parental concerns. They're not just waved away. Parents are being vilified for just expressing doubts or concerns. And parents have been so alone. I've spoken to so many parents, and they feel often unsupported by their churches, unsupported by their friends, unsupported even sometimes by their family members, sometimes by their spouses, sometimes by their other children. And there's been no place for parents to get their voices out. And I think that that's both extremely difficult on an individual level, to be a parent in this situation, to see this thing happening before your eyes, and to have no one that you can share it with who's going to at least empathize with you. And then on a cultural, societal level, it's the voices of the parents that need to bear witness to what's going on, so that we can halt this train and switch tracks here.
Yeah, I know. You said it so well there about the parents being left on their own. I think it's more than anything, it's because people think it's gay. They think it's just the same as being gay, and they
Mhm.
haven't made any. And that, I think, is the most inappropriate jump, because there's nothing to coming out as gay, and there's an awful lot with trans because of the heavy burden on the body. And
Mhm.
I'm not sure, is there a Jungian angle on that? Why we've made a jump? Is that anything to do with the psychic epidemic? Why did we need something new because we'd all kind of on a collective level accepted gay and then thought, right, we need a new way to manifest our liberal kind of values? I don't know what it is. Why did we suddenly conflate it? Or was it just subtly and cleverly orchestrated? I haven't figured that bit out.
I don't know that anyone has, and everyone asks the questions. I do have some ideas. I do think there has been an element of this being orchestrated. I mean, I don't want to, indulge in conspiracy theory, but I think it's pretty well established. There was the that law firm report that came out in November or December, early December, I think, of 2019, kind of documenting the strategy. And we know about the Yoga Kyarta principles, and we know that there's been a lot of money given to some of these organizations. I think we can, it's particularly interesting to look at institutional capture and how that happened, because some of that may have just been almost incidental. People, nonprofits with missions, for example, for marriage equality, suddenly found themselves with nothing to do, and here was this next issue. But I think some institutional capture may have been very carefully orchestrated. This all may come out in future years. In terms of the more kind of psychological reasons, I mean, Jung had a lot to say about this, and he talked about the autonomous nature of the archetypes, and is that somehow mysteriously at work here? I want to say that one of the main ways I think about it is, these sort of, if you will, a kind of a mass psychosis, which I don't think is an inappropriate way to think about this. I mean, I'm just very much enjoying Kathleen Stock's book, and she's talking about, we're in this situation where all kinds of people in positions of authority believe or are acting as if they believe that a man can become a woman or a woman can become a man. I mean, this is just patently not true. So why are we all, as Kathleen puts it, kind of immersed in this fiction? And I guess I kind of think about it a little bit more psychologically. Why are we engaging in this sort of kind of a mass psychosis? And if you think about it, it's not so unusual. I think that these kinds of psychic epidemics recur repeatedly. I mean, I'm old enough to remember I started my training as a therapist sort of in the tail end of the period in which we were putting people in jail because we believed that they'd been part of satanic abuse cults who were abusing kids in daycares, and people's lives were ruined around that. And there were hearings in the House of Representatives, if I recall, about these satanic cults. So these ideas can seize us. And I mean, we can just go through and name time after time after time after time when this happened. And one of the things that happened for me early on is at some point I was reading something about it and it wasn't making sense. And I thought, maybe I'm just too old to get this, or maybe I just am not enough of a specialist in gender. And then I thought, no, this is one of those things. This is one of those things. And so I think we just have to kind of admit this is human nature. We're susceptible to this. And this is a time when probably for many complicated reasons, let's say a false belief has kind of taken over the culture. And those of us who see that it's false are in this peculiar situation of just trying to stand up and say, hey, the emperor really is not wearing anything.
I know. And I think every time one of these comes out, like you say, the satanic daycare, and then the multiple personality disorder, which was like freakishly rare. Yep. And then again, a book came out, Sybil, just like you could kind of almost pinpoint things around, let's say, Jazz Jennings and trans kids. Sybil, the book came out with multiple personalities, and like it was farcical. Well, in my view, a lot of the kind of claims were pretty out there. Mm-hmm. And but at one point, 1 in 20 patients were being diagnosed with multiple personality disorder. Like this is in the 90s. And this was a very specific kind of clinic. But if you follow me, it was a specific area. But it was incredibly common at one point, as in it went into the psyche, and everybody accepted it. And it feels like we're right in the middle of the same thing right now. And it's very maddening to be a parent in the middle of that, because you're like, hello, has the world gone mad? And sometimes they come into the parent meetings and it's like they've come in like out of an asylum, and they're like, you're all saying the truth here, and I haven't been able to say it. And they're kind of shook because they haven't been able to say it. That's harrowing.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this the other day because, the multiple personality is another big thing, right? And people were encouraged to be ill in a way that was really maladaptive through the use of suggestion on the part of the therapist. I think the mental health field, we've got to clean up our act and just admit that we as a field are susceptible to this because most symptoms of mental health issues are subjective. There's no lab test. So it starts to enter the realm of imagination and suggestion. And I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's kind of the way the psyche works. I don't think that symptoms aren't real if we can't lab test them, but we also have to be very scrupulously careful that we don't create something that isn't there. And these people that were diagnosed with MPD had higher rates of suicide, so the consequences were real. And when I think about all of these recent, if you want to call it psychic epidemics, or even less recent ones, one of the things that makes this one worse is they weren't kids.
Yeah.
Most of the people being diagnosed with MPD, they were young women, most of them. But most of them were not children. This is happening to children.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever happened on such a scale. I've looked. There's been an awful lot of psychic epidemics, but I'm not convinced one with children and as widespread institutional capture. I'm not convinced I've actually seen the equivalent. And that horrifies me, if I'm honest.
Well, I don't know that we absolutely know the scale of this. I mean, I think to you and me, it seems like
Right,
it's
yeah.
everyone because we spend all our time
Professional
in it.
deformation, they call it.
However, I mean, I feel like I can't have a conversation with someone without someone saying, "Oh yeah, my
Yeah,
neighbor's kid or my nephew or somebody." So it certainly feels like it's at this tremendous saturation point. And I do wonder if this won't be one of the biggest medical scandals in history.
yeah. I fear that. One thing that kind of gives me a little bit of hope is it came up in the meeting, in a GDSN meeting last week, and I thought it was a really good point. Basically, do you remember the shoe shine boy? And he recommended, was it John F. Kennedy's father in 1929 to sell his stocks? Because basically, the shoe shine boy was kind of given advice for stocks. And when that happened, the rich businessman, who I believe might have been JFK's father, felt, oh my God, if the shoeshine boy is giving me advice on stocks, too many people have stocks, too many people are in this. This is a pyramid scheme, and he sold all his stocks. And he's one of the few people who realized it's a pyramid scheme. It's not making sense. Now, I'm wondering, I'm kind of applying that to the kind of the phenomenon now, where so many children are jumping in on it. There might be a feeling of it's not as edgy as it was.
Yeah.
It might become a bit kind of bandwagony. And
Well, my,
if we can hold that and move it on,
yes,
that might be how it comes out. Funnily enough,
I,
and not through the deep one.
I, this is the way these things go. And I have a sort of sardonic thought about that, is that I've often thought, if that you and me, Stella, if we went in for a gender change and all of the parents here said, I'm going to change my gender, the kids would immediately drop it because it wouldn't be cool anymore. It's like Facebook. That's for old people,
Well,
but
that's
seriously,
a drastic intervention there, Lisa. I'm not sure
yeah.
Carl Jung would be for that.
I'm not recommending it. But I do think that you're onto something there. And I think we're beginning to see that. I was talking to some people in the community, and they were saying what's happening more and more now is that more and more kids are identifying as non-binary rather than binary trans, and they're not necessarily pursuing transition. It's more of a kind of performance with maybe hair and super edgy. I don't know that I think that is particularly psychologically healthy, because a lot of times it seems like there's a real stridency in their belief system, these kids who identify as non-binary and kind of go around language policing everyone on social media. However, if it results in less medicalization or a sense of questioning the need to undergo medicalization because you're gender non-conforming, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, and that's one of Genspect's kind of positions, is that, you know, gender nonconformity, gender expansiveness, gender creativity, it's all fine and good and well done.
Yep.
And if you want to work through your gender expression, work through it. It's the medicalizing is the really the only issue, if you follow me, because medicalizing is a whole other thing.
That's it. That's the whole thing, is that we shouldn't be medicalizing gender nonconformity, especially not in children. If you're an adult and you want to change your body, you know, what are we going to say? Although, you know, there's this issue about what makes an adult, you know.
Yeah.
Is it really 18? And I don't think that 18 is the right place to
Land. Yeah,
land.
we agonized over that on Genspect, and I'll tell you in a moment. If you have any questions, send them into Angus, and myself and Lisa will field them for the last few minutes. While
can I just interrupt you very quickly? There was a moment of beautiful symmetry just now, because we hit 100 participants at the same moment as we hit £5,000 on our fundraiser. So somebody came in and made up the difference, and it's just overtaken £5,000. So I just wanted to come in and say that I love round numbers, and it just kind of happened at the same time. Sorry, go on.
He really does love round numbers, because myself and Angus have been doing the website. Well, I've been looking on while he's been doing it. And every so often he'd say, oh, 7 is a dreadful number. We can't have 7. And I go, okay, 7 is a dreadful number. So some people really do like numbers. But to go back to what I was saying, this is a very thorny issue about the age of, and we will be showing our position in a little while, Genspect's position, which we've agonized over, and we're very much trying to get it right. And it's very, very hard, because everything about this is complex and thorny and debatable on every level. But I suppose where we kind of ended up, like you said, I wouldn't land on 18. I wouldn't land on 18 myself. You know, neuroscience shows us that 25 is when the brain, on some level, becomes adult, it fuses. So we kind of landed there, but we also point out that informed consent needs to be informed consent. And when you go deep into this whole gender debate, you start realizing that informed consent is messy and isn't really great. And then you start realizing consumerism impacting, and, you know, Rhyme, Rethink Identity Ethics Medicine did a great presentation around that. When consumerism impacts medicine, we didn't know what we did know what a poison chalice it was, and oh my God, it's really turned out to be a very difficult issue around it. Is there any questions for Lisa and myself, Angus?
Oh yeah, there's loads.
Go on.
So, yes, one of them's just come in. I think is very important. So, what is the best approach for parents to find a safe therapist and ensure they won't be immediately affirmed? How do you do that?
Well, I think that's really difficult. What I always tell parents to do is to go to the Gender Critical Support Forum, where you can make a free account. And you should definitely protect your privacy, because there's no way to ensure that there aren't, you know, that it's entirely safe. But to go on there and to ask and sort of rely on other parents in your area who may have had a good experience with a therapist. Because my experience is that many therapists who haven't had specific training in this hear the word gender and immediately think, this is out of my league. I can't handle this. You need to go see a gender specialist. So they'll refer you to a gender therapist. And we all know what gender therapists do. Gender therapists, there's no special training to be a gender therapist. You can simply call yourself a gender therapist. And most people who call themselves gender therapists subscribe to gender identity theory, and will hear your child's claim that she is transgender as a statement that she needs to be supported in that new identity and perhaps ushered toward social and or medical transition. I think that it's not enough, frankly, to find a neutral therapist, because unless a therapist has seen this, thought about it, recognized the social aspects, you know, we're not good as a field about recognizing the social impact on mental health symptoms. There's nothing about social stuff in the diagnostic and statistical manual. And yet we know that things like, suicide is contagious, and depression is contagious, and eating disorders are contagious, but we don't recognize that as a field, and we have this kind of blind spot about it. So if you go to a neutral therapist and your kid starts talking to this neutral therapist about, I really hate my body, I think I'm a boy, I've always felt this way, I remember when I was 5. And I think a lot of these kids get their talking points online, but I also think a lot of these kids absolutely believe what they're saying. Like, they've constructed a narrative and they've really bought into it. I don't think it's just disingenuous. I think they believe this is really the cause of their distress, because this is the narrative that's been offered to them by the culture. And it seems to be a very powerful explanation. So they latch on to it. They're going to take it to a therapist, and the therapist is going to say, this is, I have a unicorn in my office. Yeah. And so in my experience, therapists who are neutral are not, unfortunately, impervious to being convinced by, and listen, it's my job as a therapist is to align with the person that comes into me to see me for treatment. So it doesn't mean that I listen to that I'm not critical about what I'm listening to when a patient talks, but my job is to empathize with that person, to try to feel what he or she is feeling. And to a certain extent, my job number one is to empathize and even validate what a person's feeling. That's just that's just kind of where we start as therapists. It's a very easy thing to fall into if a kid is saying, this is the source of all my trouble. So unfortunately, you need someone who thinks about this, has thought about it. I think in general, you're probably safer with an older therapist who may be psychoanalytically trained, but that's still no guarantee. And personally, I think, and Stella, you and I have talked about this a lot, that no therapy is better than bad therapy. And I would also, so you can really ask yourself, does my kid really need therapy? Because if you think the therapist is going to help your kid unpick gender, there are not many therapists doing that. So does your kid actually need therapy, or does your kid need to maybe spend more time outside or develop a broader set of friends or something like that? So you might even want to ask yourself, do you absolutely need therapy? I don't know, Stella, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I've kind of ended up where you are about that, insofar as it's hard. I think the phrase is informed therapist. Like, are they informed? For example, they could be a brilliant therapist, but if they weren't informed on how much social contagion is happening online, there's such a gap in their knowledge that I'm not sure how they could kind of operate, if you follow me, appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of complexities that need to be known for somebody to be able to provide good therapy. I think there's a scarcity. I think it's changing. I think an awful lot of therapists are very suddenly very interested in meeting myself and Lisa and Sasha and people like us and seeking training. So I think it will change, but it will take time. And I think in the meantime, if it was my child, I think I would put my money into activities and events that are out of the home and that aren't online, and that have, if it's not me kind of gelling with my kid, it would be my kid gelling with other people, new kind of, and I know this is easy to say and very difficult to do.
Yeah.
I'm very well at that. But that, I think that's where I'd go, because I think it's so difficult to get therapy that is working at the moment. And I worry about that. I worry about it a lot. And I often think actually an awful lot of the parents work well with the parent support meetings, and they strategize and they think and they worry, and they're actually, they're really involved. And maybe the child doesn't need to nurture a kind of a mental health identity, and might benefit more from nurturing a more expansive check out life, more joyous. And I know this is easier said than done, but it's where I'm landing more and more in this whole thing. Angus, have you a few more questions for Lisa? Because I shouldn't talk so much because she'll have to go soon.
I've got
Lisa's
millions.
very
I've
kindly.
got absolutely millions, so we're not going to get through all of them, I'm afraid. I think that this is an important one, which is, what advice would you give to parents who are estranged from their children?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because there is a psychologist named Joshua Coleman, and he has a website, he has books. Now, I will tell you that Dr. Coleman does not get this trans thing. And I've had some exchanges with them. I know he's had a lot of parents of ROTD kids wash up on his shores, and he still doesn't quite get it. He still doesn't get it. However, he has a lot of experience with estrangement, and his stuff works. I've seen it. So he has some very sort of straightforward prescriptive stuff. It boils down to, if you're estranged from your, let's say your young adult child, his stuff boils down to you sort of abjectly apologize and do whatever they want, which is hard for some parents, but I've seen it work. I've seen it work. So I would recommend that you check out his website, that you look at his books. I know he sometimes has online classes for parents. Um, and it can make a difference. I've seen it make a difference. And then at least you're back in touch with a kid, even though he or she may still be trans identified. At least you've got a relationship, and that's a step in the right direction. And you might have to hold your nose a little bit, because he, in his books, he lumps parents of trans kids with parents who are estranged because they rejected their gay or lesbian kid, and we all know that that's not, absolutely not the same thing. But it's, that's the short answer, is check out his stuff. But it does involve unreservedly saying, I'm really sorry, and of course I'll call you by whatever name you want me to call me, etc.
Wow, that is
So it looks like
hard.
people didn't catch the name. It's maybe somebody, because I think other people are familiar with him. Can someone put his website
There
in
it
the
is,
chat?
Joshua
Yeah,
Coleman.
yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
It's, the thing is, it what it is helpful in is getting back in touch with your kid. That's what it's helpful with. So if your goal is to be in touch with your kid, Coleman's stuff will help you do that.
Wow, that is really hard. That is
Yeah,
really hard.
it's really hard.
Because
I get that it's really hard,
yeah,
but I've seen it work.
it's incredibly hard. I find it so exhausting for parents when they come into the parents' meeting and they're saying, I'm living a fake life to my child, and it's so exhausting, and it's profoundly inappropriate. And it makes me feel very uneasy, if you follow me.
Here's the thing though. This is the
Yeah.
way I see it, is I really see this as being analogous in many ways to a cult. And if your kid were in Scientology, Scientology has this thing where if your family doesn't support you, you have to, I think they call it disconnection. You have to disconnect from your family. People
Yeah.
probably know more about that than I do. But if your kid were in Scientology, you would be told, whatever you do not question Scientology in front of your kid. Go along with it, because if not, they'll disconnect from you. And so you'd have to put on a show of being like, oh, that's so great that you found this wonderful community. Yeah, I'm sure it's really wonderful. In order to save the relationship, not because you believe the crazy stuff they're coming home with, and not because your grasp of reality doesn't matter, but because you understand that your child is compromised by having been ideologically kind of captured by this cult. So you're dealing with a compromised person. And that's why you might have to play this little game, which I know for many parents, it's a very difficult thing to swallow, because you feel like you're having to capitulate on your sense of reality. But I think if you can reframe it to yourself that you're doing it strategically in order to stay in touch with someone who's compromised.
Yeah. Yeah, somebody said other cults aren't asking you to replace your history. Some cults are. Some cults are asking you to renege on everything and sell everything.
That's right. And I think that is absolutely right. And some cults are body modification cults too, Like there's a lot about the trans stuff that, the cult people that I'm in touch with have seen this all before. This is not new news to them. They look at this and they think, I know what this is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a kind of way to frame it to yourself.
Yeah, and as somebody said, I'm not good at lying, and I think that is easier for some people than others. I just
Mhm.
personality types, it really is. Will we
Can
take one more
yeah, can I
question
come
and
in
then
with
let
one?
poor Lisa go?
Yeah, well, I want to prioritize this one because somebody asked it. I don't know if it's the same person who's come to two. I think it's actually not. So it's a question that's coming up again and again. I'd love to hear Lisa or Stella speak to why trans identity persists so strongly and so long when the onset is so sudden.
Great question.
Yeah, that is a good question. And it's true. It's true
Yeah.
that it seems to take a long time to move through it. That is, I think some of it is this this way that it becomes a whole belief system, that it becomes a kind of ideological possession. It
Yeah.
becomes the way that you think about yourself, very much again like a cult. Like people don't tend to bounce in and out of cults. They're usually in cults for a number of years
Yeah. Yeah.
because it becomes your whole framework and your whole way of understanding everything. And in this moment in our culture, it's incredibly reinforced by the media, the mainstream media, the New York Times and NPR and the Washington Post. And it's also reinforced by social media and your clan in social media. And it's often reinforced in real life, in person. For example, if you go to college and you're trying to figure out how to fit in, if you become part of the queer community on campus, you're going to get a lot of positive attention. I think that's still the case. So there's all these sources that feed it, and if you question it, you're kicked out of groups and questioned and called a turf. So there's a lot supporting it, and then underneath there's this thing that, once you get indoctrinated into a cult, and again, I just think there's a ton of overlap here. Once you get indoctrinated into a belief system, it becomes self-reinforcing because you see everything through that lens.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I can see why they stay in long. I can see why they stay in long because it's upheld, and there's the once you're in, it's like, come on over here and we're all believers and it's going to be so great. And it's kind of like we're believing in the Messiah, we're believing in the promised land, we're believing in the day will come when you change identity. So that's such a gorgeous thing to buy in, that one day it'll be fabulous. And that's, what people have bought into in so many different levels for thousands of years. But why do they fall in so fast? Because they fall in like rockets. It's the speed of the fall in is completely incongruous with the length of time they stay in. I I wonder about that. I don't have a good I think it was very well named when Lisa Lippman called it rapid onset gender dysphoria. It's like, wow, nail on the head, because it's so fast. I think parents don't quite take it seriously in the first couple of months
That's
because
right.
it's farcically fast.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
Although I want to say that I don't think I mean, what I think happens, or the stories that I've heard, is that a kid is spending time on social media, finds these ideas. They're kind of intoxicating ideas, really. I mean, it's a really interesting thing to think about gender. I remember Jane Wheeler, who I know here today, once said to me, you start thinking about this and it goes to the very heart of what it means to be human. These are fascinating ideas to contemplate. What does it mean to be a gender? What is gender? Am I a man? Am I, it's
who am
interesting
I?
stuff. And so I think that's who am I? And it just attracts these bright kids, who are
Yeah.
thinking kind of philosophically. And And then there's just such a swirl. It's so heady. And this is where, my Jungian hat comes on. And I think about the power of an archetype. It's intoxicating, and it pulls you in. But there's all this, somebody, I wish I could remember who it was, but it was one of the detransitioners who talked about, like when cults are working to indoctrinate you, they often will, some cults will force you to say, sit in a room and watch propaganda videos for 3 hours a day or something, or read literature for 3 hours a day. And one day transitioner was saying, I was spending, 6 hours a day watching YouTube transition timeline videos. You're self-indoctrinating, you're spending more time on these indoctrinating materials than most cults would ask you to.
Wow. Wow. I think you're right. I think we don't know the pre-time spent circling it, and then bang, once you're in. Something like that.
Right.
We better let you go. I'm very aware that we're stealing Lisa's time, and she's given it so generously. I want to lift an amazing book is available, and Lisa wrote it. It's called Motherhood, and it's only out a few weeks. A really special read. I know there'll be a lot of mothers here because I know mothers are disproportionately appearing at these more than fathers, but it's an extraordinary read about motherhood, would you like to say a couple of words about it, and then we'll let you go?
You're so kind. You're very kind. Yes, it's my first book. It has absolutely nothing to do with gender, but it is all about motherhood and how motherhood can be an opportunity for self-growth on the part of the mother. So it's not how to parent. It's just about what happens to us as we parent. And it's really for parents with kids of any age. So buy it and read it. And if you like it, leave me an Amazon review.
That's it. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. I'm so excited about this. Congratulations, Stella. This is fabulous.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Power of the parents.
All of you. Yeah. Okay.
Catch you later. Take care. Bye. Thanks. So what we will do now is we're going to share our screen, and we're going to have a look at, sorry, hang on, let me see, at the PowerPoint that we have. Let me get this right. And this is about Genspect in general, what we're about, where we've come from, why we've put it together. You're more than welcome to continue, put any questions to Angus. He will be given part 2 of this presentation. But I want you to know what we're about so that you can kind of be aware what Genspect is, what is the point of Genspect, why we've set it up. In a nutshell, just so you know, we've set it up to lift parents' voices, to bring parents' voices into the mainstream media, because we think they've been ignored and dismissed. And actually, we think there's great power in them, because you're driving along and you're, listening to the radio mindlessly, and a parent comes on and says, I'm one of thousands of people who's receiving inappropriate therapeutic. My kid is receiving inappropriate therapeutic and medical treatment. You turn up the radio. That is a very interesting story. Nothing to do with gender and everything to do with the point of children receiving inappropriate medical and therapeutic treatment is a horrifying thought, and it needs to get out there, because there's thousands of parents who are saying the very same thing. So I've become very involved in the gender issues since I released the film in 2018. Before that, I did have my own issues with gender when I was a kid. And so I had kind of a half an eye on gender issues as I was growing up, but not much. I came through it. And when I left it behind, by the way, for those of you who know, I came through like extreme, maybe 7 years of gender issues, and then left it behind, and I haven't got a bit of it. It never came back, and that was it. It took a long time to peel off. There was a few years of it removing. But once it was gone, it was gone. It was just, I completely accepted I was the body, in a very, very faulty body that I have, but that is the body I have. And I came around to it in the end. But I am an advisor with SEGM and also with RIME, and a facilitator at the GDSN. They're kind of support meetings. And not many people know about the IATDD. That's an international association for therapists for detransitioners and desisters. And also I'm myself and Lisa are involved, and Sasha, with founding Ghetto, which hasn't come out yet, but it's going to be a place where therapists can go who are interested in gender exploratory therapy. So there are new things happening. Thoughtful Therapists have just kind of launched about a month ago, and I'm in them. And Thoughtful Therapists are very much about confronting conversion therapy and hopefully kind of amending it so it's a more appropriate document that doesn't conflate gender identity with sexual orientation, because they're two different concepts that follow two different arcs. So they need to be separated. So as this slide says, Genspect is an international alliance of parent groups and professionals whose aim is to advocate for the parents of gender questioning children and young people. We're a forward-facing organisation that's focused on opening this subject up into the mainstream media. That's what we want to do. We want to get the voices out there. And we want you to help us by subscribing so that we do have the thousands. We know the thousands are out there, but so that we do have a good, and we've had such a brilliant, already we're in the thousands on Twitter followers, and we're only there since Friday. So we've had an extraordinary response, and we're really thrilled because it proves our point that there are thousands of parents. Sure, we got thousands of followers within literally 36, 48 hours or something like that. So why was it set up? Genspect was set up to give a voice to parents of gender questioning children and young people. Many parents are concerned that their kids are not receiving appropriate treatment and support and do not feel free to speak out about their concerns. Genspect will say loudly and publicly that thousands of parents are unhappy with the treatment paths their gender questioning children have been put on. We favour a more holistic investigation for these distressed children. We're for the whole body, whether they've been bullied or whether they have autism spectrum disorder or ADHD or OCD, or whether they've suffered a trauma or they have internalized homophobia. We want to look at the whole person before we specifically go for gender. These are some great organisations that are already out there. For example, SEGAN, that promotes evidence-informed healthcare for gender dysphoric youth, RHYME, and Jane Wheeler is here, thank God, and she's a great, has been a great help to us as we've been forming Genspect, improving ethical long-term care and treatment for gender dysphoric youth. IATD, I told you about. Transgender Trend, one of the first. Stephanie Davis-Arai was at our launch last night. She spoke, and she's just such a powerful powerhouse. Fourth Wave Now, I think they were the first group. Stephanie said Fourth Wave Now were the first group, and Transgender Trend, I think, were the second group back in, I think, 2015, 2016. And they have been a lifeline for people. Such a beautiful website, Fourth Wave Now. Safe Schools Alliance, that's schooling in the UK focus, Gender Health Query, Partners for Ethical Care, brilliant new. And the last couple are kind of new organizations, which is a real sign, just like Thoughtful Therapists, it's a real sign that, you know, things are sprouting, you know, things are kind of opening up, changes are happening all the time. If you go onto the Genspect website, genspect.org, you will find the parent support groups. So it would be nice that if we were a HQ, so if you know of any other parent support groups, tell us, let Genspect know. It's very easy to find us now. We're online, info@genspect.org. And you will see that there is lots of parent support groups out there. They do give a lot of help. There is a massive scarcity with the therapists. There isn't a massive scarcity with the support groups. There's lots of them. So make sure you're getting your support, because the more I get into this, more I think, you know what, parents who are going to the support groups and who are expanding their children's lives are doing very well in comparison to focusing on getting the right therapist for the child. Because like I say, the children nurture a kind of a distressed identity, and it can give them a sense of kind of, they nurture that kind of sick patient identity, and they don't give it away freely. And you can feel you're going wrong. I know this from therapy anyway. You have to be very careful giving therapy to teenagers, because they can become very, very identified with being a patient. And so it's something that's careful, nothing to do with gender. It's something that you'd have to be careful of anyway. Throw in gender, and it's a real concern that I do want to lift. Anyway, what do we do at Genspect? We provide a public platform for parents. Until now, loving and engaged parents' voices have been dismissed. We aim to rectify this. We emphasize the vital role that parents play in their children's well-being, and we aim to raise parents' concerns about the treatment their children are receiving. We recognize that parents have been hamstrung by the need for anonymity, and we aim to overcome this obstacle with carefully chosen representatives. So we're very aware that parents have been anonymous till now and silent till now, and we're hoping that we'll be able to say things. So I can say, well, the parents are saying, and other people can say it. I saw Claire Graham is here. She's one of our team members. And so we can write, or we can go on the radio or whatever. And I know Julie Mason came to a couple of the webinars. I'd imagine she's not at this one because she was at the other two, I think. And she's also a lovely team member. Genspect represents parents, not the other way around. The members of our core team that I've just mentioned must be faithful in articulating Genspect's position. The parents we represent have no such obligation. So when I'm talking about Genspect, I'm talking on behalf of Genspect. When you're talking about yourself, and you do what you want. And as a parent of working with Genspect, we encourage you to continue as a member of any other organisation, such as a parent support forum or a political campaign or a religious group. You do as you wish. You're a parent and you have to get your voice out in every way that you can. We hopefully will help you do it. That's really about it. Angus, do you want to take over and do part 2?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
And you can be my Sherpa with the slide transition, if that's
I will.
all right. Yeah, very good. So you can see all of this on the website. So I'll show you the website after this as well. So this is our team. We've got Stella O'Malley, who you may have heard of. We've got Pam Buffone, who really took on poor educational standards in Canada. We've got Kathleen Dooley, who's very, very committed to this, an attorney in the US. We've got lovely Claire Graham, who's here now, who's been very prominent on Twitter and on YouTube, and has a wonderful turn of phrase on Twitter, or had before she was banned. We've got Gillian Mason, who was here in the other 2, but probably needs some sleep at this point. We've got Avi Ring, wonderful, wonderful man. We've got Marit Ronstedt, who's a teacher in Norway. And we've also got the anonymous parent, which you'll see on the website as a way of saying, this isn't the team. This isn't the whole of the team, because there are other people in the team who are working away and want to protect their own identity, and particularly want to protect the identity of their children, their family members, and who can't necessarily be as public as other people, but they're no less committed. And then if I can get you to move on to our advisors, we've got lots of advisors, and it really is the aristocracy for the people who are interested in this and are looking for people who are informed about this. We've got Sasha Ayard, so that was the first webinar, which will be available to listen to. Roberto D'Angelo, who is the second webinar. We've got Stephanie Davies-Orai, who was the first webinar. I'm just boasting now. We've got Marcus and Sue Evans, who left the Tavistock when they realized what was happening. We've got Az Hakim, who's been very, very supportive of parent support in the parent support groups, and very, very strong on this. We've got Aaron Kimberley, who is a trans man and a mental health nurse, who's very concerned about the transitioning of children and young people. We've got Stephen Levine, who's of course been very prominent in the scientific community. On the same note, we've got Lisa Littman, who did the fabulous survey and coined the term ROGD, and who was also at the first webinar, I think. Yeah, the first webinar. We've got Lisa, who you've just seen. We've got Abigail Schreier, who wrote Irreversible Damage, and did a lot to bring this whole phenomenon into the light of, into the public gaze. We've got Sinead Watson, who's spoken with some really heartbreaking honesty about her own experiences and the poor care that she revealed. And last but certainly not least, we've got Jane Wheeler, who's here with us now, and who's the president of Rethink Identity Medicine Ethics, which is involved in many things, including the wonderful Gender A Wider Lens podcast. So we've got stacks of talent and stacks of lots of people coming in with their very particular expertise and forming this community of expertise. So what will we do? We will open up a public dialogue about the complexity of gender and identity development and get away from this nonsense of thinking that everything is so simple when it's not. Many of us who are inside this organization know fine well from personal experience, it's not that simple. And we're on a good footing to explain that. We'll highlight the role the media play in guiding vulnerable youth toward a singular explanation for their distress and inadvertently steering them down pathways to lifelong medical intervention in the process. Because the media have failed, they've dropped the ball on this. And we are going to help them pick it back up. If I can overextend the metaphor, we're going to lobby politicians, journalists, clinicians, and educators to help them understand the complexity of identity development, the complexity of what's going on. Oh, we've got a charger issue. In more concrete terms, what we will actually do on a day-to-day, what are you doing sitting at the desk basis? We will write and ghostwrite articles to appear in the press, articulating parents' concerns and telling their stories. Not everyone can write, not everyone feels confident writing. We have people who feel confident writing, and we can liaise with journalists and get those stories out there. In the same vein, we will book TV and radio interviews and podcasts so that parents can get their own voice out there, whether they want to be seen on camera or whether they just want to be heard. We're really, really hoping to create fresh and engaging graphic content and animations so that we can present these issues in an accessible way, these issues that the young people are facing. This is a very visual generation. And I think in many ways, we've fallen a little bit behind on that. So we really, really want to get into that and try and articulate what our message is in an accessible way. We're going to broadcast our own exclusive content as well, so you can hear from the people who are making the news. We've got all these cases going on, and we want to bring those voices in so you can hear from the horse's mouth, as it were. We're going to host webinars for parents like this one, so that parents can share ideas with some of the leading specialists that you've seen and others as well outside of our team. You know, we're very open to working with lots of people. We're generating working relationships. This has already started between parents and clinicians. So that the clinicians are off kind of looking at the science and getting this nailed. And the parents are coming in with their own real stories, and we're kind of connecting those things. And in the process of doing all of this, we're uniting thousands of parents from hundreds of disparate support groups so they can speak with one voice. And we're also open to doing lots more. We want to represent parents, so we're open to ideas. Get in touch, join the parent forum, which we'll come to in a moment, and tell us what you'd like to see us doing. So there's a lot there. Politics and religion, this is quite important actually. There's an article which you'll see on the website which I put together, which kind of delves into this in a bit more detail. We are non-partisan, we're independent, we have members from the left, the centre right, the right. We don't have members from the extremes, but that leaves an awful lot. And we hold a range of personal beliefs. Our interest, what unites us, is that we are exclusively committed to the well-being and safeguarding of children and young people. So we're not party political. We're not allied with any particular religion or religious movement. We welcome people of all faiths. We welcome people of none. And you can see from just going through the testimonials on our website, which I'll also show you shortly, that it really is very, very diverse. There's a diverse group of people with these experiences. We want to campaign for informed decisions that prioritize long-term health. We want to advocate for an evidence-based approach to gender distress. When it comes to healthcare professionals, we want to encourage them to evaluate the low evidence base for the current affirmative approach and look more closely at the harms that medical treatment paths can cause, so that they're treating this in the way that they would treat anything else. This has become a field of medicine which functions very differently to any other field of medicine, and we want to address that, and we want to advocate for better quality research across the board. We're also familiar that there are a number of things relating to the questioning of gender which we want to raise awareness of. We want to talk about the role sexuality can play among young people who are questioning their gender, how it can be conflated with gender. We want to talk about the high occurrence of comorbidities, neurodivergent types like autism and ADHD. We definitely want to look at the impact of trauma on identity formation. That's a huge thing which has been overlooked. We want to raise awareness of the lack of high quality peer-reviewed evidence for the current treatment path for gender questioning young people. You hear it said in the media, people toss out these statistics. Anyone who's looked into it will know a lot of them are flimsy, and that's being generous. And we want to raise awareness of the significant risks of the medical interventions which will impact children for the rest of their lives if they undertake lifelong medical change. In education, we want to see all educational establishments hold a neutral space for students as they explore their gender, their sexual orientation, their identity formation. We want supportive environments for students so they feel neither encouraged nor discouraged to follow certain paths. We recognise the need for young people to be free to explore all aspects of their gender, sexual orientation, and identity formation. So long as that doesn't become destructive, we think that that's a positive way to be in the world. And we're encouraging educational establishments to maintain an open and supportive environment based on the principles of informed safeguarding. Safeguarding is more advanced in some jurisdictions than others. And where it has been implemented, it's done very well. in protecting kids. Unfortunately, that's not everywhere. So we want to get that conversation going, and we want to start talking about the pros and cons. And that's my bit.
Thank you very much, Angus. That was really, really good. I think it was anyway. Myself and Angus are what's the word? We're in danger of becoming a bit of a self-praise team as we tell each other we're great. But we're in the last section of this, and I know there's a concept called death by PowerPoint. So I don't want to kill you off with it, but I do think it's very important that you find out what Genspect are about, and so you can have a look at the website. This slide will be available to you if you subscribe. The recordings will be available to you if you subscribe. And we wish you would subscribe anyway to give us power, because the more subscriptions we have, the louder our voice can be in the media, because we can point to our subscription. So you're helping us if you do subscribe. And there's very little to subscribe, and we're not going to flog a dead horse. We're not going to, what's the word, spam you. You know what I mean? We're going to be very selective. So what is our position? We wish to help create a society that supports gender nonconformity without requiring the heavy burden of lifelong medical treatment. So we're all about gender nonconformity. We're not all about lifelong medical treatment. In this fast-paced world, we advocate for a slower, more thoughtful approach to any difficulties that children and young people face. And we favour a biopsychosocial approach that includes the holistic view of the individual. And that, by the way, is not a new approach. Biopsychosocial approach is a very, very well-established concept, and it's only gender that's being the maverick here. That suddenly that's the only thing we should think about and talk about. It's an unusual approach. So our position on gender issues, gender is a culture. Now, there's a million versions of what is gender, but to us at Genspect, we say for clarity's sake, gender is a cultural variable set of behavior and personality expectations applied to sexed bodies. We believe there are many routes that may lead to the development of distress about an individual's gender. Equally, there are just as many routes out of such distress. A lot of ways to get into gender dysphoria, a lot of ways to get out of gender dysphoria. Big point in Genspect is that point. We seek a wider range of treatment options and more evidence-based approach for gender questioning children and young people. About identity formation, which is a key point in the Genspect position, is that gender identity formation happens, as it says there. We appreciate that gender identity formation is an important psychosocial stage of development for youths from pubescence to early adulthood, and this can present as an identity crisis. Again, a well-established concept in psychology. We believe that a change in identity can sometimes seem like a concrete resolution of a trauma, leading young people into the mistaken belief that they can leave their old selves behind them. Mistaking an alluring belief. Now, the age of medical transition, we've agonized over this. We've given it an awful lot of thought. It's not come to lightly, and where we've landed, and you heard Lisa Marchiano talking about where we would land earlier, and she knew she wouldn't land at 18. And so we're in the favor of the rights of mature adults to make their own informed decisions. We want to raise the bar on informed consent, and we believe that informed consent should mean informed consent. The current state of the research indicates that most people do not fully mature until their mid-20s. Until they're about 25, neuroscientists tells us that the brain hasn't fully matured in terms of cognitive function and the development of the personality. For this reason, we have grave qualms about anybody below this age making the decision to transition. We also believe that those classed as vulnerable adults may take even longer to develop a stable social and sexual identity. So that's the position we have taken. Puberty blockers, we're against puberty blockers for gender dysphoria for the following reasons. Obviously, we're completely understanding and pro puberty blockers for precocious puberty. It's a completely different concept. But for gender, we're against them because they're an experimental treatment program. They are drugs that can make irreversible changes to young bodies. There is no country in which they have been licensed to treat children with gender dysphoria. They block sexual development, sexual desire, organ growth, and cognitive function. And that doesn't even cover the unknown long-term effects that we are yet to understand. There's been an awful lot written about puberty blockers, and we're fully clear in our position that we are against puberty blockers for gender dysphoria. For children and young people, we do not believe children or young people are equipped to make lifelong decisions about medical transition procedures. We're very clear about that. Adolescence and young adulthood is a key developmental stage during which identity is evolving. We believe that young people should be encouraged to accept and to love their bodies. We do, however, support the rights of mature adults to make informed healthcare choices regarding medical transition. So our focus is always going to be on children and young people. We're well aware that there's loads of other issues, but you have to kind of take your focus and, you know, put your stake in the ground. And that's where we've put our stake in the ground. We're for the parents and we're focused on children and young people. Our position with sexuality, we wholeheartedly support the rights of lesbian, gay and bi people. And we're proud to include many lesbian, gay and bi members and supporters in Genspect. We abhor bigotry and homophobia and have a zero tolerance policy towards such forms of discrimination. We acknowledge that lesbian, gay and bi youth are often gender non-conforming. And rather than suppressing sexual urges with medication, we support an approach that allows adolescents to explore their sexuality with freedom and acceptance, which apparently is radical at the moment, but should be really a fairly basic concept that has been established for many years now. So our position on the trans community is we value open and honest discussion between members of the trans community and others to ensure that strongly held beliefs about sex and gender do not overpower one another. We've no prejudice against trans people in any way. 2 of the Genspect advisors have transitioned and 1 remains a trans man. Contentious issues should be worked through respectfully. So long as that condition is met, we welcome contributions from trans people. Some people think we should change our bodies. Others think we should change our minds. Both viewpoints have their merits and discussion between the 2 should be possible. That's our position on that. We're coming to the end of the PowerPoint, you'd be glad to hear. How to support us. Follow us on Twitter, please, at Genspect. Follow us on Facebook if you're a Facebooker, at Genspect, or Instagram at Genspect International. We'd really appreciate if you happen to have any in with national and local media contacts. I do think radio is an underused medium, and I think we should be using it. Or it could be newspapers or local kind of media. Please help us out. Email us on info@genspect.org. Join the Genspect Parents Forum, which Angus will tell you a little bit about. Make a donation if you wish. I must say you've been so incredibly generous so far. I'm actually embarrassed to even say that because you've been amazing, and it's been really heartening because it really shows that actually people get it and they're saying, yeah, this is what's needed and I want to support it. So it's been lovely that something like over 5,000 euro has been donated, which is just such a boost, not only for our morale, but for our ideas around making graphics, making animation, making kind of good, high quality content. We've already got some great high quality content on the website, but we're certainly heartened to make more. And if you're ready to speak out, if you want to speak out, if you want to maybe be a voice on the radio as a parent, or to send your story to our media team as something that could be kind of anonymized but used in the media, please do email alex@genspect.org. More than anything, could you please subscribe, because that will get our numbers up and it'll make our voice stronger, and therefore your voice will be stronger. There you go. That's the end of the webinar. And not the end of the webinar. We do, Angus will show us a few, the website, but certainly it's the end of that presentation, which I've done 3 times now in the last 18 hours.
Well, I go onto the website now just to show, yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? Maybe come up at the end if you want. You're more than welcome to come at the end with some questions. You can go on the screen if you want, or you can just type the question into Angus as a chat, or you can just kind of talk without the screen if you follow me. Turn the screen off and talk. But we would like to hear anybody's voices when Angus has gone through the website. So this is the fabulous website that Angus has done. Over to you, Angus.
Okay, so I'm not going to go through this in too much detail because I'd rather you went there and had a look for yourselves and have a poke around. Right now, the important thing is this button here, subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. I just want to show you, if you're looking on a tablet or on a mobile, then you'll see you get a hamburger menu here, these 3 lines here, and you can subscribe that way. So here we're going to put our latest news. This is stuff that's been going on, but it's also the stories that we're involved in as well. So we want this to be a really reliable source for you. Oh, I forgot to say, up here you've got your social media icons, so you can connect to our social media if you didn't get all of those
Can I
details.
just jump in? Somebody very nicely on Genspect set up LinkedIn as well. So we will have LinkedIn as well. So we're way ahead now.
Well, yeah, we'll add LinkedIn. That happened in the last, so much has happened in the last 24 hours. So that will come in. So we've got other links here to subscribe and to follow us. These are our sort of 3 focus areas: health, education, and the media. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see here, the mission here is we're not just speaking for a few, we're speaking for thousands, and we want to provide a platform for a more honest and open conversation. So I'm just going to come back up to the top, very, very quickly show you, this is our wonderful team, all of the people that you saw, that's the anonymous parent. These are our wonderful advisors, stacks of talent. This is the press team at the bottom. That's me. That's Mary, who's writing a lot of our content as well. And that's Alex, who's being absolutely ferociously brilliant on social media. And there are other people as well. I mean, there are so many people who are working way behind the scenes. I want to show you this. This is our testimonials. Now, everyone knows that if we wrote every parent story, then there would be no map left. There certainly wouldn't be an English-speaking world left. It would just be covered. So we're not trying to collect every story that there is, but what we are trying to do is show a sample. So you can go in and you can see, so we're also including these blue dots, which are people who have desisted as well. So stories where there was a trans identity and then things started to change and develop. And so you can go in here and you can click one of these stories and it will take you here. You can see here that people have chosen in some cases to include their political affiliation or their religious affiliation. So you can see we've got all sorts. We've got lapsed Catholics, non-lapsed Catholics, left-leaning, right-leaning, centrist, apolitical, all the rest of it. You know, spiritual, all of the different kind of configurations. So it's a very diverse community of people who are going through this, and we wanted just to do something which represents that. And I think this does it very, very effectively. This is important. Well, it's all important, but this is also important. This is our position. So these are very, very well thought out statements. There's a lot here. So you can go through this. It's a sort of FAQs, but it's more than that really, because a lot of expertise from people who've been thinking about this stuff for years has gone into these position statements. These have been arrived at by people who have spent a lot of time and energy and love thinking about the right way to go. So read through all of those and you'll see where we stand. There's a great little resource list here, curated resources. We've got parent support groups if people are coming and they're not in a support group and they want to connect onwards. We've got these, I mean, some of them, like Parents of RGD Kids in particular, has got so many groups that we're not going to list them all, but we're using this as jumping off points to parent support groups. Other helpful organizations, and there are many, this is just a selection of the ones that are out there, like, for example, Transgender Trend, LGB Alliance. And then down here, this is a really nice little set of useful links. There are books, media articles, there are podcasts, we've got papers and various articles which have been written here. We've got documentaries you can watch, parental guidance, peer-reviewed papers for the more scientifically minded and for people who want to get into the research a bit more. This is just a link to our news in more detail. So if you want to kind of browse through and look at the various themes we're covering, then you can. And then there's a contact page here. So if you want to get through to the press team, that's here. And then all other inquiries, that's just info@. So go up to subscribe. You can leave your details. Now, the parent forum, the way into the parent forum is you go to genspect.org, you subscribe, it will ask you what your interest is, and there's a bit where you can say, well, I'm a parent, or I'm an educator, or whatever it is. Then what we will do is, in short order, we will email out all of the parents and say, here's the link for the parent forum, come on in. And that will be a place where parents can discuss with one another what we're doing and make sure to connect. It's not a support group. We're not replacing support groups. What we are is talking about how to be that front-facing organization, how to reach out, how to get the parent stories out. We're open to your ideas. We need somewhere where we can collect those ideas and where those ideas can be rolled around and see which ones are the really, really good ones. So genspect.org, that's got all the apart from the LinkedIn, which I shall endeavour to add at some point that I have a free minute, which will probably be, I don't know, next year. Yeah, next year, sometime next year. I'll add LinkedIn. So everything you need, if there's anything that anyone said and it's kind of slipped past you, then go to genspect.org. Okay, that's the website.
Thank you very much. Would anybody like to make any comment or come on the screen or ask a question? You're very welcome to either put up your hand or else message Angus.
Will we stop recording in case people want to ask personal
maybe
question?
I will. Yeah, I think I will actually. It's lovely to see loads of people saying that the graphics are great. I'm going to stop recording now.